or it didn't quite work. So now we're back. It's something that I'm really excited about. We got to spend quite a bit of time in Orlando, Florida, right before this whole pandemic happened. We spent a good couple days at PodFest. It was fantastic. We had a good time, and nice dinner we had with a lot of great people, a lot of good podcasters.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, you were quite literally one of the very last people that I got to embrace, that I got to be face to face with, more than 6 feet closer.
That's
So
right.
it's incredible. It was the first time we met in person, but you know, in today's day and age, you develop rapport and friendships and relationships with people all the time online, that by the time you meet them in person, it's like you've been connected forever.
Yeah.
But it did not disappoint when we hooked up in person. It was like, wow, there you are. And we just sort of picked up the everything that we were establishing. And that dinner with a dozen or more of us that night in Florida was certainly one to remember.
With a lot of great podcasting talent, a lot of great podcasting companies involved. And I mean, that's the stuff I personally live for, right? I mean, my wife is always like, are you ever going to get a job? And I'm like, not really. I want to do this the rest of my life, podcasting, hosting events, going to events. Luckily, we make some money off of it. But, you know, it's the connection that we make with people like you. And that kind of puts us in a great place to partner up on different projects, doing some cool things for the podcasting community. But Josh, again, this is very exciting to have you. So let's kind of break down what's going to happen here today. I want to talk about you, right? Your story, your journey. We'll talk about PodMAX. We'll talk about on-air brands as well, which is part of everything that you're doing here in this podcasting space and beyond. So let's start with this question, one that I'd like to ask most of my guests right away. What makes you an outlier?
Oh, I really like that question. And I feel like it would be best summed up by sharing the relevant part of my story. Today, I'm the hidden entrepreneur, and that's because I spent 40 plus years hiding. I showed up to every situation hiding all of my skill, all of my talent, all of my ability in exchange for desperately seeking the approval of others. Now, you know, that gets very tiring very quickly. And I went down that path for so long. Today, I'm blessed with 2 adoring children. I have a 6-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old son, who really early on showed me that there is a much better way to be. And I made the choice at that point to take the necessary action and change what wasn't working. So now, to tie that into your question, while I was in that big bulk of my life seeking approval, the biggest frustration always came at the end of the day when I would find myself alone and I would wonder, what in the world am I doing wrong? I know that I'm capable. I know that I'm skilled and talented. In fact, I could do certainly better than what I see others doing that I desperately wanted to do, but I never gave myself that chance. So that conflict, that internal struggle created enormous pain and frustration and isolation, which all turns into anger, which, my goodness, didn't create the kind of person I wanted to be. So knowing my whole life that I feel disconnected, I feel as this outsider, I always felt that way, but had no idea why it was happening. So finally, I made that choice to no longer seek the approval because I wasn't getting it anyway. There's a whole host of irony there. So I always found myself in that outer circle and have now come to appreciate it. And the whole irony is that once you accept it and just do what you're capable of doing, you attract the very people you've been meaning to attract your whole life. Case in point ever, I'm here with you in this very moment. Do you think that this union would have or could have happened years ago when I was less than this person that I'm capable of? Of course not. Now I inadvertently attract the right people who I've always been capable of attracting.
You know, I've heard this story before a little bit because we've talked about this before. And the first time I heard this, it took me by surprise, right? Knowing you now, the man that you are, the entrepreneur that you are, very charismatic, very grounded, right? You're a people person. You're funny. At PodFest, walked in on one of your sessions. You were holding court, man. It was a packed house. You were in there just in your element. So when I see that, and then I hear this story, I'm like, wait, what? It doesn't make sense, but something must have happened. So what was that switch?
Well, in order to seek the attention and try desperately to gain that approval, much of my, previous iteration of my life, you're showing up desperate, insecure. So I have all of these skills and abilities, but they're muddled, right? They're not authentic. They're not genuine by every stretch of the definition. So when I'm showing up, it becomes unattractive, again, by the true sense of that word. It doesn't attract anybody to say, oh, I like you. I like what you're doing. I could relate to this, because it's so inappropriate inside. So I suppose that I had all of this skill, talent, and ability, but I wasn't allowing it to appear directly as I was able to. In fact, I spent 15 years pursuing an acting and film career for that very reason, because I was like, well, maybe this is the way that I can get the attention. I'll bounce around on stage. I'll make you laugh, and then you'll like me. You'll applaud. I'll feel great. But that's never the payoff.
Yeah, sure.
So now when I come to the table and I'm like, forget all that. I can do something better. I'm going to just exercise what I'm capable of doing, and those that like it will appear and will be attracted to it, and those that won't. And the whole issue that I've always feared was that, if I were to really put into play what I'm capable of doing, these people who I was trying to gain the approval of are going to retaliate, right? They're not going to like this. So I always played the vision that they're going to tear me down if I were to do something powerful, the stuff that I'm capable of doing. They might say, who do you think you are doing that? Get out of here. Don't do that. And that frightened me. So I never did. But now those people are nowhere to be found. In fact, again, I'm surrounded by the most extraordinary people that I continuously attract day in and day out by just being myself. Imagine that.
It's funny. One of the things that we do with Outlier, we've hosted 200 plus events in our career. We focus on entrepreneurs for the first part of this company. And so we had a lot of people come to us, and because of what we do, we were able to mentor and consult and things like that. And one of the things that I kind of heard and didn't quite understand, but it seems to be a bit of a something that's out there that people struggle with. Nobody cares. Nobody's staying up at night plotting my destruction for the most part, right? But sometimes we think about that. They're going to say this. They're going to think this of me. And we've heard this before, but who's they? Right? Who's trying to put you down? Who's trying to keep you down? Nobody thinks about us enough to do that stuff for the most part. So what I want to know, it makes sense how you felt. It makes sense what you're doing now, but let's dig in a little bit deeper. What was truly that switch? I mean, something must have happened, a mindset switch or something in your life that truly made you say, no more, I'm out. Let's focus on the future.
Yeah. And as we've heard these stories before, there is typically one defining moment for me. It is and was my children. And if you follow me, if you know me, you see that I am the proudest of fathers, and I embrace my children publicly as much as I can, because they are the reason. Early on in their young lives, I realized that, okay, I see what's happening here. I'm the child in this circle. And at that moment, having known my whole life what I'm capable of doing, but really shying away from that, being face to face with them and knowing that this is the responsibility that I must step into, at least be the father. The last thing I wanted to do was have these two adoring children, impressionable, right? You know how children are. I knew better. I said, I don't want to be this angry, frustrated, insecure person that they look up at, because the connection was the last thing I want is projecting myself 10, 15, 20 years down the line. My children are now out of the house, grown up as young adults, and that's the person they saw me as. And really, that's who they may have become because of that influence. Yeah. I really couldn't have my daughter or my son really be this insecure, desperate, seeking approval. That just wouldn't have worked for me. So I said at that moment, my goodness, there would be nothing I can do. But right here, Josh, come on, you are better than this. The time is now. You must make it happen. So that was the switch. That's all I needed. I said, you know what? I've always wanted to be a father. I'm now given this chance. I love the role. I love the relationship. Let me do what is necessary. So I had, like we all do, from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to sleep, a plethora of non-serving negative habits, some small, some medium, some large, some you're very aware of, some are a little more subtle and subconscious. But I said, all right, I got to take inventory here. I got to be so self-aware, and I'm going to do it. The choice. I made the choice, which is all it's ever about. You either make the choice or you do not make the choice, which really is still making a choice.
Sure.
So make the choice you want, which is what I did. And I said, let me see what I'm doing. I've always been capable, right? I've always been powerful and skilled. I've just been playing the victim and making excuses. No more. No more. If I want a different result, I got to do different things. We know.
And there's so many of us that feel that way, right?
Yeah.
And so I love the way that you've been able to paint the picture of who you were, what you were going through, and now what you're up to now, which is a great transition into let's talk about what you're doing at PodMAX. Right. Again, it paints a perfect picture. And I bet that there are a lot of people that are going to be listening in as we replay this and as we turn this into one of our podcast episodes about, they're going to be nodding their heads thinking that sounds familiar. That's some of the stuff that I struggled with, or so those are some things that I went through. And so now you're here a whole lot better, doing great. You're killing it. Right. Again, charismatic. A lot of people are listening. A lot of people are liking what you're doing. Let's talk about specifically what you're doing with PodMAX.
Certainly. And the quick connection is that just like I'm here in this very moment, there is no way by any stretch of the imagination that I could have gotten to my position and role with PodMAX if I wasn't here and now as the person that I've always been capable, and really embracing that and stepping to that. My business partner, Eric Cabral, we're co-founders of PodMAX, which is an on-air brands company. PodMAX itself is a podcast production and event company. We create events and products and services for entrepreneurs, including producing shows. I met Eric just a year ago.
Wow.
And again, it's one of those things that we met, that meeting, absolutely the way we met at an event. I wouldn't have found myself at that event if I wasn't stepping into my ideal. And we certainly wouldn't have hit it off. There wouldn't have been the connection that there is if I wasn't this person. But these are the things that I've always wanted. I've always had these grand visions for this kind of company and for surrounding myself with these kinds of people. And only until I continue to make that deliberate choice and be as productive and solid and deliberate as I can, am I living that dream, that vision that I've always had. So PodMAX is a company that I helped found, and I'm so proud of, because it really allows me to bring my best, do my best, and be my best for those that most need it.
It's funny because now that I'm seeing this, and obviously I follow the company. I recently saw one of your videos, the best interview ever promotion. Dude, and that's good stuff. Like you're obviously a natural, right? It's something that you enjoy. You can tell that it's something that you enjoy. Now, what is this going to look like though? even though you're somewhat of a startup right now, what is this going to look like in 3 years?
Such a great question. So we are at the beginning stages of this. As you mentioned, the best interview ever was taken from my role as a podcast host, the Hidden Entrepreneur Show, based right from my brand. I've always been a curious person, and when I was going from this dark, depressed, lost person to, okay, I got to do something differently with my life here. I knew a podcast would be the greatest vehicle for it, but I didn't know where it was going to go. So I just started saying, I'm going to create a podcast and I will keep my eye open for opportunity, which is something that I continue to do. I don't have all the answers. I don't know where everything's going to lead, but we have certain benchmarks of what we want to happen. So with the show, I realized that, yeah, I've always been curious and I felt drawn to it. And I got that response from the guests. After a while, they were like, you know what? You're really good at this. I've been on a lot of shows and this was the best interview ever. Good. And after hearing that a little bit, I said, okay, that's the product. That's what I want to do. So we put that out into the system of PodMAX and on-air brands. And what we're doing now is we're taking the product and service side of it, which is helping podcast hosts start and improve their current shows. And we're also creating the event side of it, which prior to this crazy circumstance we find ourselves in-house now for, we had and have several live events throughout the year lined up, which are now on hold, but we've certainly pivoted and now we're doing some virtual stuff. But looking to the future and the near future, that's what we're going to do. We're going to sprinkle simultaneous and consistent live events, different big flagship events, different smaller workshops, different Q&A sessions, just different live events that we create in our creative wheelhouse to help the entrepreneur community get their meaningful message out.
What are the challenges, especially now with this pandemic, right? With this, the coronavirus, much like you guys, we've had to cancel 2 of our upcoming podcast festivals that we have throughout the year. Now we're going virtual. What are you guys doing with these live events? You had last time we talked, you had quite a few lined up back to back almost. What's I know you're going virtual a little bit, but I mean, the end of the year, or what's the plan there?
It's crazy because let's take March as that threshold when, you said we had last met in March at the podcast event in Florida. We flew home from that event with 8 events taking us through September on the calendar, yours included. How amazing was that? So we were going on that path. Then this happened. So we're certainly like, okay, we got to regroup. Those are all either canceled or on hold or postponed. So what in the world do we do? It took us a little bit of time to sort of get our footing and have conversations and see what would make the most sense. It wasn't a direct path, but finally we got there. It might seem like an easy switch. Well, take your PodMAX live event that you've done in person a handful of times and just put it online. But originally that posed some challenges. So we had more meetings. We figured it out. We got creative. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking the PodMAX event, we're making it global. So it's PodMAX Global, means we can bring in, that's our city limit, right? So we can bring anybody to the table now to experience this event online in a virtual format with us. The great thing that I've heard other companies experience is that when you're sort of forced into this scenario, as we were and as everybody is, you can either flounder or you can figure something out. And when you figure the thing out, it'll probably be, you know what, this is the best thing ever, isn't it? The fact that we were able to find this, because we've had conversations in the past about virtual stuff, a virtual event. But because we were going powerfully on the live in-person event path, we didn't take the time for that. So this almost forced our hand, which is solid. Now we see the good from it. We see the bigger picture. We see what this is going to do, how this is going to help us going forward to still incorporate legitimate virtual events sprinkled throughout the live ones we're going to do.
It's funny how it's similar to what you guys are doing. Obviously, we're like, our companies are doing a lot of the same things for the most part. Yeah, we struggle with that idea of going virtual and kind of holding this festival virtually, because I think what sets us apart and what we do well, right? I mean, there are a lot of great companies that host a lot of great events and things like that. What I like to kind of point at is that for whatever reason, we're able to kind of bring the magic, right? The sense of true community. And I think, and again, others are doing that as well, and they're doing a great job. But there was something a little bit different, a little bit rebellious, a little bit, obviously being true to the brand, outlier-ish about this whole thing. And people kept coming back for more and more, right? I mean, for a while, we felt like the Grateful Dead, because we had people following us from city to city, right, coming to our events, and it was fantastic. And so what I am afraid of and what I'm struggling with is, can we bring that same type of magic to a virtual show? Right.
I love that. Yeah.
And obviously we're all in and we're going to make this happen. But that was one of the worries, especially in the beginning.
It's almost like we've been having, like you said, the exact same conversation. That was my thing too. We've taken pride in the energy, in the vibe, in the experience of the PodMAX in-person event that we created. And we got the feedback to validate that, which has been amazing. So that's why it wasn't an easy switch. Oh, let's just do it online. Because as you've said, well, how in the world do we replicate what we've created intangibly? Yeah, tangibly, you get on podcasts in one day, you attend some panels, there's a keynote. Sure, technically, we could replicate that online, but that's not what makes the brand. So that was the challenge.
And it's so much cheaper to do, right? I mean, this virtual event is going to cost me almost nothing for hosting these big events. The venue, the food, all that stuff adds up. And so, but even then, I think we kind of wrote off 2020 for live events, like most people have. We were going to attempt to do something in September, but I think we're just going to call it and not do it. 2021, we'll focus big time on that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of getting back and those dinners and those meetings in the hallways at these events. That's where the true magic happens. One of the things that we like to do is when we invite our speakers to kind of come and speak. A lot of these guys come in for an hour, then they're out. We're like, if you come, we encourage you to do your hour on stage and stick around. Truly, that's where a lot of the cool stuff happens, right? With the attendees and the speakers. And again, we try to make it as easy as possible for them to do so, because that's why people keep coming back for more. It's those true face-to-face connections that make it work.
That's what I've found has been the biggest personal challenge during these times for myself. I'm a people person. I thrive on energy, especially in this, new iteration, this powerful presence that I'm trying to keep upping every day. Back in the day, it would make me uncomfortable if I were to, it's all kinds of contradiction and irony, but I so wanted your approval, but I'd be so awkward about it, and I'd resist being in person, and it would just be a mess. But now there's a more genuine, heartfelt thing that I can connect with people on. And my goodness, I didn't realize how much the in-person vibe and energy was really necessary for my well-being. So when that was cut off, it took me a little while to really understand. It wasn't pretty for a few weeks. The first few weeks of this were not pretty. I couldn't focus on really anything creatively, which again is another big component of my soul, which I think for all of us is the case. We're all creators, we're all creative beings, depending on how much you exercise that. But for me, I take pride in that of myself, being able to create, to produce, to do. And I just couldn't find my footing in this exclusive virtual experience. And it was devastating for a while. So I had to take a cold, hard look and say, all right, Josh, so now you're being challenged with, who are you without? We're going one step further now than what I did a few years ago, upping my game and showing off my powerful persona, as we all could and should be doing. But now I was being challenged a step further, saying, okay, now you found your groove in the business and with some creativity and with some people stuff here. But now let's say, Josh, you don't have that. Now who are you? And it took me a little while to realize that was happening.
Yeah. You know, I hate to make it sound too cliche and things like that, but this pandemic, obviously some horrible things have come out of it, but hopefully a lot of great things can come out of it as well for individuals, for companies, as we pivot, as we figure out how to do things. Right. One of the things that I hope happens is that a lot of these larger companies are looking around saying, you know what, maybe we don't need the entire staff in the office, right? Maybe they can work from home more often. Obviously, help with traffic, help with smog, help with all that stuff, and work-life balance as well. And so I hope that as individuals, as podcasters, as entrepreneurs, we can do the same for ourselves. What works, what doesn't work, and not just kind of lay down and let it happen to us, right? We got to fight every single day for what we have. And I think a lot of good stuff can come out of this. I think there are going to be a lot of great, powerful companies and individuals that are going to be able to pivot or take advantage of this time and come out stronger in the end, right? And I hope that happens.
They either will or they won't, meaning we're all daily, consistently, before, during, and after this whole situation we're in, we're challenged to step up. And just like when you're in a traditional weightlifting or exercise program, the more resistance you have, that's where the strength builds, right? That's where the energy and the strength comes from. That's where the muscle comes from the resistance. Exact same thing in life. This is all just resistance, but we're met with resistance in every circumstance, before, during, and after all this. Take this out of the equation. So we have to personally look inside and say, all right, who am I? What do I want? I can do one of two things. I can sit and kick and scream and make an excuse, or I can say, all right, what do I have to do to get through this? So many people, myself included, some years ago, I'd hate the hard work. I didn't want to do that. I'm a baby. I don't need to. Why? That's a victim. And it took me a while to realize that, that's a thing. It was pointed out to me a few years ago by a mentor I had that, hey, there's something called the victim mentality. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have that. That's me. Thank you. And it's another thing to get over that and say, I don't have to be that. None of us have to be that. So you can make the choice, and you're going to make the choice, or it's going to be made for you by not making the choice, one way or another, to step up and through every resistance, find the strength, find the reason you're doing anything, and move through it. For me, knowing the end game, which, if I could be so bold, is how is this whole life for all of us going to end, right? We know the answer. My children put that clearly into perspective for me. I said, wow, so my life now has these two adoring beings. I want this as long as possible. And not only that, if life should end unexpectedly at any moment, which, yep, the definition of life, right? I said, I want the preceding time and those moments leading up to it to be as significant and ideal as possible. I don't want to get angry and then, this and that. That's now babyish. That's so insignificant. So find the thing that gets you to realize in the blink of an eye, this is all going to be over. This whole thing we're doing now, this doesn't mean anything, right? It means nothing, and it means everything. Like you said, Ever, who's planning my demise? Who's looking out? Nobody. Who remembers what you said yesterday? You. You're the only person. So realize that nothing matters. It only matters to the significance that you make it. So find what matters, because in the blink of an eye, even in 50, 80, 100 best case scenario years, this is going to be over. Before you know it, you're going to look back and say, why did I? Find it.
I think I know the answer to this. You've obviously expressed it well here during this episode, but as we start to wrap this up, tell me about, what's the biggest reason for your success up until this point?
Making the choice to be successful. Sounds simple, sounds easy, right?
Very, very difficult to do, right?
Right. But it starts with making the choice, understanding that you have to make the choice and then start putting in the work. I said it. It takes some work. It takes daily work. So when I started down this path and I evaluated myself and say, okay, what am I doing that isn't serving, that I have to replace? Don't get overwhelmed. Pick one thing at a time and celebrate the change. Make the choice to change it. And this, I always say, is like I'm in recovery. And in many cases I am. I'm recovering from that person that I was. And this, like any drug user or alcoholic or somebody in recovery, is a daily thing. Every single day, it's a new day. You're met and faced with the same challenges. I now have several, if not a dozen or more, specific things, patterns, and habits that I do from the minute I wake up to how I wake up, to the minute I go to sleep to how I go to sleep, and everything in between.
Powerful.
And it's a daily and consistent choice. What's that?
Powerful.
Yeah. So you have to do it. You have to make the choice. You have to find what excites you. You have to get excited about what's working. When you do something and you change one thing and you see it's working, celebrate and say, look at that. Now let me check off the next thing. What else needs to be changed? You either do or you don't. That's the answer.
I like this because you're living it. You are different, all in, and that's what we like about this. A lot of the people that listen to our show are entrepreneurs, full-time, or they're working 9 to 5 and they have a side hustle and they want to become full-time entrepreneurs. So this, I think, fits perfectly with the message that we want to send to them, that, it's a mindset, right? You can do it. Nobody's really holding you back. There are challenges, but they can be overcome. So thank you for coming on and talking about your journey, talking about the stuff that you guys are doing. We're big fans. For those people that want to get to know you a little bit more, that want to follow you, where can we find you online?
JoshCary.com is my website, and that'll lead you to every other place you want to stalk me on.
So Outliers, you can go to outlierhq.com. That's outlierhq.com. Review our podcast, subscribe to it. You're going to find more people like Josh on there. Josh, you did an amazing job. We really appreciate you being on the show. We wish you nothing but success, and no doubt that we're going to have you back in 3 years to talk about exactly what's happened from now till then. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot of epic stories in between. So again, congratulations on your success. And we're looking forward to working with you on a few different projects coming up.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, Ever. Likewise, certainly much respect and appreciation for who you are and what you're doing. And I'm very excited that even through all this craziness going on, we're still finding ways to collaborate in both directions. And we're in it for the long run with you. So thank you.
I love it. Thank you. Outliers, we'll talk to you tomorrow.